Hello and welcome to Dad and Swebb Talk Sports. I'm Swebb.
And I'm Dad.
And we are the dad and daughter duo talking about all of our favorite sports moments from the recent times. It's been a few weeks. Happy New Year, Dad.
Happy New Year.
What's going on? 2025, a new year.
Nothing new. Absolutely nothing new, Swebb.
I find that hard to believe. For me, the Christmas tree has been put away. All the decor is gone. It's snowing in New York City.
It's snowing?
Welcome to 2025. What have you been up to, Dad? Tell the people what you've been up to.
I moved, Swebb. I'm a resident of South Carolina now.
South Kakalaka. Welcome. So you didn't get any snow today then?
No snow. It was about 60 degrees. I just have one problem, Swebb, and it's a big problem.
What's the problem?
The food police down here.
You
You
know
shouldn't
what?
be eating that. Your portions are too big. Did you read the ingredients on the box? You're having too much rice, but I like this. That's the problem. This and that. Swebb, I feel
You
like
know
I'm a
what?
hostage.
I was thinking that your face looked a little bit leaner than I recall during Christmas.
I feel like I'm a hostage, Swebb.
This is good because I know you weren't going to make one of your resolutions losing weight and getting healthy. But now it seems like it's possible whether you want it to be a resolution or not.
I'm going to escape next week.
Okay.
I'm escaping next week.
Something tells me we'll be able to beat you in a foot race.
I am escaping next week, Swebb.
Okay. I'm sure if you were in New York right now, we're recording on a Monday night, and you had seen the snow all day, you would be complaining. So the grass isn't always greener, I guess, huh?
Yeah, but you know how important chowing down is, Swebb.
And hey, just so you know, Optimum is in a little bit of a battle with MSG Network. So people that are in New York that have Optimum as their cable provider can't even watch Knicks and Rangers games.
That's crazy. I saw both of those games on NBA TV.
See, things are
They were
looking up.
both on NBA TV.
Happy 2025. All right, so
Man.
let's talk about what's been going on in the past couple of weeks. We haven't recorded since December. A lot has happened, obviously, in the sports world. The NFL season for the New York Jets is now over. They finished the season 5-12. The New York Giants finished the season 3-14. The Jets will have the number 7 pick in the 2025 NFL draft. The Giants will have the number 3 pick. The Jets have some work to do, which is the understatement of the year. They're in need of a GM, a head coach, and likely a starting quarterback, among other things, Dad. So let's talk about the Jets.
The Jets, well, first of all, they got to hire people with experience, okay? Enough of these, but see, here's the problem. When you have a dysfunctional organization, it's hard to find experienced general managers and coaches don't want to come and work for you. So you always get the young guy that has no experience, and that's what the Knicks went through for years. And then finally, they got Rose. Even though he had never been a GM, he was an agent, and he knew the game, Leon Rose. And then he went out and got Thibodeau, who had a world of experience and is one of the best coaches in the NBA. And that's what's turned the whole Knicks situation around.
So the
Until you can
Jets
do
have
that-
had a terrible history of just changing GMs every 3 to 4 years and changing head coaches in the same amount of time.
That doesn't
So
work.
it's been an endless cycle of just really less than mediocrity. It's been an abysmal time. So it's not, you're no longer getting, years ago you probably would get the pull to New York, come to play in New York, you could be the big man here in New York. You don't get that when you have an organization that just has no likelihood of even being competitive. I've been watching this past week, I had off from work for 2 weeks, started to run out of things to watch. There's only so many Hallmark Christmas movies you can watch in a 2-week span. So I went and fired up Netflix again, got my Netflix account back, and I started watching Receiver, which is a documentary that follows 5 wide receivers. It followed them during the 2023 NFL season. So it followed Justin Jefferson from the Minnesota Vikings, Amon-Ra St. Brown from the Detroit Lions. It followed Devontae Adams, now a Jets receiver, but at the time he was with the Las Vegas Raiders. It followed Deebo Samuel and George Kittle from the San Francisco 49ers. And to watch the day in and day out, the interesting thing watching organizations like the Vikings, the Detroit Lions, the 49ers that have now had a ton of success, particularly in recent seasons, being very competitive, winning their division, making long playoff runs. The Detroit Lions are the number 1 seed in the NFC this year. Watching those organizations go about their business was completely different than watching the Las Vegas Raiders go about their business. The Las Vegas Raiders, during the 8-episode documentary, fired their head coach. Devontae Adams obviously was unhappy. They had to bench their starting quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo, at the time. Then they had to bring in some guy that no one's ever heard of. And to watch the difference in the way that those organizations run, it wasn't just the fact that one team was winning, one team wasn't, one team had good players, one team didn't. It was also like the look in the eyes of all of the coaches. They were like deer in headlights. The players then, that trickles down to the players and into the locker room, right? So you're watching these incredibly successful teams. That particular season, the 49ers get to the Super Bowl last season. So you're watching all these teams have success, and then you're watching the Las Vegas Raiders, and I couldn't help but think about the New York Jets in this scenario. Just a poorly run organization, coaches that don't know if they're going to be here. The head coach didn't know, the starting quarterback didn't know how to throw the ball to the number 1 receiver over the past 5-6 years in the NFL. He didn't know how to throw to him. Then you've got the coaches that don't know how to coach the starting quarterback who's no good. Then he gets fired. Then you have all these interim coaches come in, and everyone's kind of like, hey, I don't even know where I'm going to be in a few weeks. And that, to me, it was like if I had closed my eyes, I would have been watching the New York Jets.
Well, that's exactly what's going on here. You have, and they're about to make a mistake again, possibly. They're already interviewing coaches, and they don't have a general manager. The protocol should be hire a general manager and let him hire the coach, right, along with the owner, if the owner wants to have a little bit of say, even though the owner doesn't know. These owners don't know the game well enough to know what's what. Just take the checkbook out, hire the general manager, and let him hire the coach.
If you want a really good general manager that you want to be at the helm for the long future, you want him to be in place first, and then he chooses his coach. You don't want to have a situation where the general manager doesn't make the hire. Then if the coach isn't successful, the general manager is looking around like, I didn't hire that guy. So yeah, they're already doing it backwards. And I was on a few different websites after watching. I'm like, how do teams like the Detroit Lions, which for a large portion of my childhood, were not good, come back around and start to have success?
My whole life they weren't good. And
how do teams like the Minnesota Vikings become such a strong team both offensively and defensively? So these are teams that had draft picks. They drafted right. They made some trades. The Detroit Lions trading for Jared Goff to the Rams, for Matt Stafford going to the Rams, but they got a bunch of draft picks back with that. And I'm wondering, how do all these teams have success and the Jets still can't figure it out? It seems like a pretty easy recipe, but they're already starting off on the wrong foot. They're setting up interviews with all these coaches. Great, but you don't have a general manager. So I'm going to need you to back it up a little bit. Rex Ryan, who formerly was the head coach of the Jets from 2009 to 2014, he's a little too much in the news cycle for me in terms of getting this job. I don't know if he's controlling the narrative or if what we're actually hearing is true, that he's a front runner for the job. I'm hoping not, because he was 46-50 during his time as the head coach. First 2 seasons, extremely successful. The Jets get to the AFC Championship and lose. After that, it's been downhill ever since. So not to say that I'm a GM or an owner of a team after watching 8 episodes of a Netflix documentary, but man, they sure make it look easy when you're watching this stuff on TV.
Well, that was real story. That wasn't like a fake thing.
So I'm wondering if Woody Johnson has watched this documentary, because this is how you set up a good winning franchise.
But they have one more problem. And most New York teams have the same problem. A lot of good executives, a lot of good coaches don't want to come to New York because of the media. Now, look, the Jets have had, who's the quarterback with Seattle right now?
Geno Smith.
Geno Smith. They drafted him on the second round years ago. He's 33 years old now. Do you know he made the last 2 Pro Bowls?
And
But
he
they
made
ran
$6
him out of
million
town.
on Sunday after
it
winning
was-
the game
Right.
and getting to the playoffs. And
So-
there was one other kicker that he needed to get.
He
to
was
his
all,
$6
he was
million
run out of
bonus.
town. It was all his fault. Then they went and got Sam Darnold, who just made the Pro Bowl, and his team is what, 14-3?
14-3, yes.
Right. Okay. They're going to the playoffs, and he made the Pro Bowl. Okay. He was run out of town. It was all his fault. Then they went and got Zach Wilson, drafted him high. It was all his fault, run out of town. Meanwhile, for Wilson, for all those 3 quarterbacks, their offensive line stunk. And many of those years, they didn't have any playmakers or very few playmakers. Receivers, halfbacks, running backs. Okay, then they go out and they get Aaron Rodgers, who's on his way to the Hall of Fame. Okay, last year he gets hurt on the 4th play of the season because they don't have an offensive line. He got sacked 2 plays in a row.
He's
He tears
40
his
years
Achilles. But he didn't have a bad season this year. He threw for over 3,900 yards. The problem is their defense fell apart this year, and they lost 4 games because of place kicking. Their place kicker was horrible.
The defense, when you're on the field all the time, it's tough to play as well as you would like. Also, while watching the game on Sunday, the Jets were 2-5, I guess now 3-5 to end the season, and when leading the game in the 4th quarter. So they lost 5 games throughout the course of the season, going into the 4th quarter with a lead, which is unacceptable. So
Well, you know why that happens? Because their offensive line isn't that good, and they can't run the ball and keep possession. So they're 3 and out, or they get a first down, and then they're 3 and out, and then they have to give the ball back, kick the ball back, and then the other team goes down and score because they can't stop the run.
So they've got a lot of work to do. I was looking. I would much rather take a chance on an assistant GM from a successful franchise. Like, that seems to be the recipe for success. You either got...
That's what they had in Joe Douglas, and they fired him after 6 years.
Well, you either have the key is you have to be with the franchise as it's having success. If you're just with the franchise and it hasn't been good, then you don't need to get promoted. But you look at some of these organizations, and some of these GMs have been with the organization for like 15 years. And they started as a video intern and worked their way all the way up to the GM. So I would love to, I don't know the front office of the Jets that well, but there's been no success. So I don't want anyone internal. I would love to take an assistant GM or a VP of player personnel from one of these franchises that has had a lot of success over the past 4 or 5 years, and give that guy the chance to run his own show. Because now he's when you're the assistant GM of a place like the Baltimore Ravens or the Kansas City Chiefs or the Buffalo Bills, and you've had success over the past 5, 6, 7 years, you've been under the tutelage of some successful executives. So hopefully you're able to spin that into having your own success leading a team. We'll see.
That's how it could work. Brian Casher with the Yankees started out as an intern, and he's been general manager for 2 decades.
So we'll see. But tons to do there. More to come. We'll obviously keep everyone abreast of our opinions as the Jets start making moves. But I wake up to an email this morning and you're like, oh, the Jets play 3 games in Florida. Everyone should fly down and watch a game in Florida. I'm like, I'm out. I'm not interested, okay? And you're emailing us like, oh, they're going to be good this year. With what evidence, sir? Where's your evidence? This does not hold up in court.
Well, they're going to play in Jacksonville next year, Tampa, and Miami.
They're playing in all 3 cities.
The tickets are a lot cheaper, and the weather is nice. At least you don't sit out there and you're freezing to death, and you get a chance to see...
You couldn't even get it out with a straight face, but you were really trying to sell it via email. Come on, guys, family trip to Florida to watch the Jets play. No, I'm good. I'm not even going to New Jersey.
I'll pay for your ticket.
I'm fine.
And you did me a solid taking me to the Carolina game at Madison Square Garden a few weeks ago.
Well, stick with me,
and the
kid.
tickets
Something tells me
tremendous.
that the tickets that you get for the Jets game in one of the Florida cities is not going to be the same as the tickets that I got to MSG a few weeks ago at the Garden.
When we walked in there and we were sitting like a few rows behind the Carolina bench, but what really topped it off was when I'm sitting there, game's getting ready to start, and I see Mitch Kupchak walk in. Mitch who? Mitch Kupchak. Brentwood native, and I never told you this story, but he's a year older than me, and I was growing up in the Bronx. And back in those days, all the recruiting information, there was no ESPN, there was no internet, there was nothing. There was a magazine called Street and Smith. So I'd get the Street and Smith magazine. I started rooting for Carolina in 1968. And I get the Street and Smith magazine, and they said, oh, Carolina got a commitment from this guy, Mitch Kupchak, in Brentwood, Long Island, Brentwood, New York. So I look on the map. Oh, that's on Nassau County. I'd never been to Nassau County. So I get in my car.
It was in Suffolk County.
Suffolk County, sorry. In Suffolk County, I look on the map, exit 53 on Long Island Expressway. So I get in the car, I drive out there and figure, I'm a dopey 17-year-old at this time. So I figure, you remember those days, Swebb.
I don't recall.
I drive out there, get off at exit 53, Wicks Road, and start driving around Brentwood. Maybe I'll see this big 6'11" guy, because he would stand out. And I drove around for like an hour. I'd never been to Brentwood, never been to Suffolk County. And
was it safe back then?
Yes, it was very safe back then.
Okay, so you could drive around Brentwood back then.
Because, what was that? So that was in like 72. And like 8 years later, we moved, and that's where we bought our first house, in Brentwood. So, so didn't see him, but about 2 years later, I think in 74, he's one of the greatest players to ever play at Carolina. In 74, me and my friend Bruce, we drove down to Chapel Hill, stayed at the Carolina Inn right on the campus, and went to a game there. I think they played either Yale or Dartmouth. It was like in January of that year in Carmichael Auditorium.
And he would go on.
And that's when Carolina always had 2 or 3 big men. He was a great big man. First round pick, NBA, then eventually went on to become assistant GM of the Lakers, and again eventually GM of the Lakers. He's responsible for guys like Kobe Bryant and Shaq and that.
See what happens when you have a great organization? Assistant GM to GM.
He learned under Jerry West, one of the greatest GMs of all time, and then he became one of the best GMs of all time.
Wow. It's almost like we planned this. It's almost like we planned for Mitch Kupchak to be at the Carolina game at the Garden a few weeks ago when we were there sitting right behind him so that we could then go full circle and say, the Jets, this is what you got to do.
That's what you got to do. And it was amazing. We're sitting there, and we're outside of a few old-timers and a few of the coaches from Carolina. Nobody kind of recognized him. And this guy is one of the brains of the NBA and one of the greatest players to ever play at Carolina. And was a gold medalist on the 76 Olympic team. And
if anyone is wondering, yes, Dad did embarrass me by going up to him. He's like, I got to go up to him. I said, Mitch doesn't care who you are, Dad. So.
I had a conversation with him.
Well,
and then he knew people that I knew from Brentwood.
We all put our pants on the same way.
Shut up, Swebb.
Just people. But glad that we could see a Carolina win. They are playing this week. They're now 9-6. Just playing by the skin of their teeth. Squeaked out another win against Notre Dame this past week. They'll play SMU on Tuesday, so tomorrow or when people are listening to this. But man, it's going to be it's just that kind of team. When everything's clicking, they look great. They look like a top-tier team. Unfortunately, in a 40-minute game, everything's probably clicking at the same time for about 7-8 minutes of playing time, and then you've got a few other minutes where the other team is making boneheaded mistakes, and you're just going back and forth. And so it's just one of those seasons for Carolina.
They have really good guard play, but this is the shortest Carolina team I've ever. They've always had 2, 3, sometimes 4 big men. And real good big men. I mean, big men that are destined for NBA. When Mitch Kupchak was on the team, he had Bobby Jones, he had Tom Lagarde. When I first started rooting from '68, they had Rusty Clark, Bill Bunting. They always had 3 or 4 big men.
Yes, it would help if Carolina had big men. But what I will say is they don't always play the cleanest brand of basketball. So when you're missing and you have guys that maybe aren't as talented as some other teams, and when you look at the rosters side by side, you've got to play clean, smart basketball. Their big men make too many fouls, can't defend properly, don't box out when they're going up for rebounds. Lots of too many turnovers out of the guards as well. So stepping out of bounds when they're going up for jump shots in the corner. I've now seen that I saw it 3 times in 2 games. So these are the types of things. Hey, your roster isn't as talented, but if you play smart, if you play clean, you can actually win a lot of games, and they don't have that.
Yeah.
But hey, they're better than the Miami Hurricanes, because guess what? The Miami Hurricanes, Jim Larrañaga, longtime head coach of the Miami Hurricanes, retired. They're 4-10. They're on a 3-game losing streak. And Jim Larrañaga says,
in the middle of the season. I can't believe that guy. He was the coach of the year in the ACC like 2 or 3 years ago.
In Miami when I was at the Miami FSU football game. He's a legend. Got the team to the Final Four for the first time. He said NIL, Wild Wild West. After going to the Final Four, 8 of his players wanted to transfer. So these are the things, some of these old coaches, you have to be an executive, like a GM of a college team now. You need to have money to be able to get the best players, and you need to be able to guarantee some playing time. So it's a different ball game now. So hey, college
Dean
basketball.
Smith never guaranteed one player that he was going to start, but things were different back then. He never guaranteed. He didn't even guarantee Michael Jordan that he was going to start. Nobody.
And if you're one of the top tier blue chip programs, you might not need the guarantee of playing time because you're playing for one of the top tier programs. But now, if you're a school like Miami that's playing against a lot of top tier programs, it becomes difficult because they don't have the history, the level of players historically that come back to the campus the way some of the Dukes, the Kentuckys, the UNCs of the world do. So it's tough. And if you don't think you have a chance of winning, so, college sports, NIL, Wild Wild West, transfer portal, always open.
Yeah,
Millions
it's no
of
good.
dollars.
That's destroying.
That's 18-year-old kids.
Guys hopping around. They're giving guys money when they're still in high school. Millions of dollars.
And we've talked about this many times before. I'm okay with players getting paid, especially athletes in some of these non-revenue generating sports across college athletics, gymnastics, volleyball, track and field. Some of these athletes, all of these athletes, you have to be very talented to be a Division I athlete. Some of these athletes have turned it into a business, getting the right sponsors, building a social media presence and creating content that goes viral. These are things like you should get paid for it if you have a huge following. The challenge is now you've got schools that are doling out, you have to get the best quarterback recruit, you have to pay $10 million to a 17-year-old unproven kid. Like, these are the things now that we're dealing with. And now you've got schools, this is why the SEC is so good, because it's a football conference. They have money. Football makes the most money for college sports. So now you have all these teams that have huge wallets and alumni that want their football teams to win. Now you take some of that money and you're also giving it to the basketball team. That's why the SEC is the best conference now, because they have money to be able to give these players across the board. So that's the thing that makes it unfortunate. Listen, get your money. I'm not going to tell people to turn down money. It's not their fault, but it is frustrating as a fan to watch this now.
And you just hit on something. Because the SEC schools are making so much money in their football programs, now they can buy up a lot of good basketball players. Hey, Kentucky was always a top-notch basketball program, but Alabama wasn't.
Right.
Tennessee wasn't. Tennessee's number one now. Bama.
And these schools are also big schools, so the alumni pool is a lot bigger. These are public institutions that have 20, 30,000 students on campus. Like, Miami is a private school. They have 10,000, 12,000 students enrolled. So when you even talk about the alumni base, it just is a complete game changer. So this is college sports for you now.
That's why Carolina went out and got Belichick. And he's been hitting the transfer portal, and they probably hope to build up their football program big time so they can start doing what they got to do with the basketball program.
Well, hopefully he can hit the transfer portal for the basketball team and get some big men next year, because I don't know if I can watch another season of the basketball that I've seen out of this team. I would be fine with the team not being as talented as other teams if they played clean basketball, but they play sloppy basketball, turnovers, no fundamentals. I have patience for some of the freshmen, but it's still grinds my gears.
The freshmen are playing pretty good ball. Freshmen are playing great. Ian Jackson's playing great.
Too many turnovers collectively out of the team. He's not the biggest problem, Elliot Cadeau. But then you go out and you hit a 4-point play in a game against Notre Dame to win the game. I feel like I'm drunk because I'm just going back and forth. I'm happy. This team sucks. This is annoying. Like, I'm like a tennis match, just going back and forth watching this team. So let's talk about the Knicks.
Yeah, let's talk about the Knicks.
This is my eggs. If this is my basket right here, these are all my eggs. And my future eggs are in the Knicks basket. They're on a 2-game losing streak. They play Monday night against Orlando. They've won 3 games against Orlando, all 3 games that they've played against Orlando this year. Tough back-to-back against Oklahoma City, who's one of the best teams in the league, best team in the Western Conference, followed by Chicago, who's playing with a lot of energy. Derrick Rose night. I'm not worried about a 2-game losing streak. I am worried about the amount of minutes that Tibbs likes to play the guys. But let's talk about the Knicks. What have you seen? What are you hoping to see now that we're in 2025?
Okay, they lost to Oklahoma the other night. Oklahoma's the best team in the league. A night or two later, a few nights later, they beat up Boston also. So it's and they were in the game and they just ran out of gas late, very late.
The whole starting 5 played over 40 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's why. So
in the first game of a back-to-back.
And then they fly to Chicago, and they play the very next night. And they're in control of the game, and again, they run out of gas. It's tough. These back-to-backs tough. And going from Oklahoma up to Chicago, they probably get in there maybe 6 o'clock in the morning. It's tough. But That's the way the schedule is. Everybody has the back-to-backs.
I think their
But
next 14 games, they play 12 at home. 2 of the road games, I think, are in Brooklyn and Philly. So this should be a month where they can
but
hopefully
they
rack
play
up some
better
wins.
teams in January than they did in December. So we'll see. But the
Have
team
we
looks
heard anything
good.
on Mitchell Robinson?
Yeah, he's not ready to play yet, and they're hoping that he can be in full contact practice soon. So he could be another 3 weeks away from playing.
So we're talking about a February
Right. And when
time
it
frame.
started out, it was December,
Right.
most definitely January. Now it's hopefully late January, most
February
definitely
is the best
February.
case scenario.
He's going to change a
Realistically,
lot
knowing
when
his,
he can play.
his injury history.
And he got hurt on a dirty play by Embiid in the playoffs. That's what caused all these problems.
But
So
he's injury prone. So, and his frame, like, it's tough. If it wasn't that, it would have been something else, I'm convinced. Here's the thing. The Knicks are a good team. Karl Anthony Towns, December Eastern Conference NBA Player of the Month. We know the starting five is extremely talented. Deuce McBride has been hurt for the past couple of games, so not having his offensive production coming off the bench.
and his defensive production.
I think that's been one of the big differences because they're not really able to score. Even Cam Payne, who's been he's been very successful for the Knicks coming off the bench, hasn't really put up the offensive production that you would want to see with Deuce McBride being out. So I would like to see Tibbs play more guys, especially on these back-to-backs. Like, this is just what you have to do because you don't want these guys to burn out come March. So
But
we'll see.
Shamet is playing more, and he doesn't like playing a lot of inexperienced players. That
How do you get experience?
he wants to win, and he probably you know how he gets experience. He's sending some of these younger players down to the G League in between, and they're playing down there in between and coming back.
I need them to play some NBA minutes. It's more about the long term. Yes, I'm all for trying to win each game every night. I certainly don't want any load management. Like, we're not a team that has to worry about that. But I would like him to play some of these guys, give these guys a breather. Like Jalen Brunson, great player. His frame, playing 40 minutes a game, I get nervous. So the Knicks, they play Orlando, as we said, Monday night. They're home for a large portion of the month of January. Dad, before we wrap things up, what are some resolutions, whether they're with your sports teams or whether they're personally, resolutions that you have for 2025?
I got to figure out a way to sneak more food by the food police.
Mom's running a tight ship. That's what I like to hear. Anything else? Any resolutions for your teams?
My teams? No, you know me, Swebb. I stick with my teams no matter what. I'm used to this up and down stuff. You're
Well,
spoiled.
I'd like to see the Jets get a GM and a coach. Let's
Well,
start
they're
there.
gonna get. They will get a GM and a coach. Hopefully, the GM
Well, not
has
just
experience.
any guy off the street.
Right.
So
Maybe, you sound like from that documentary you watched. You sound like you've learned a lot. Maybe they'll hire you.
I'm a quick learner.
A lot. You know what? A lot of success is common sense.
And you'd be surprised how few people have it.
I know. And unfortunately, and in sports, if you just look and pay attention to what the people that are having success are doing, and you copy off of that, you could be right there. If I'm in NFL executive, I'm looking at Kansas City. What do? Okay, they have an experienced coach that's excellent. And they have a real good defensive coach, used to be with the Giants when they were winning, and he's the defensive coordinator. And they run, and Andy Reid, the head coach, runs the offense. So it doesn't matter who the offensive coordinator is, okay? And then they went out and they just keep replenishing the defensive line, the offensive line. Yes, they have a great quarterback. He didn't even make the Pro Bowl this year. okay? But they just surround the team with so many good players and they always have young players coming up. They'll draft the guy and then he barely plays. But by his second and third year, he's starting.
So it's safe to say your resolution is that you want the Jets to get it together as well.
Yes.
Okay.
You have to get it together.
The word of the year for me is joy. I'm choosing to live my life more joyfully in 2025. And if that means, being a joyful fan of the Knicks, the New York Rangers, the Yankees, the Jets, UNC basketball, the Miami Hurricanes. We didn't even talk about them losing in the Pop-Tart Bowl. I'm choosing to live my life in 2025 with joy. So we're going to enjoy the little things. We're going to enjoy a sloppy game by UNC at MSG where I'm high-fiving the boys as they're running off the court after a big win. We're going to just enjoy every step of the process.
Yeah.
And I'm putting this on camera so we can revert back to this. We can revert back to this maybe in a few weeks, maybe in a few months, maybe in 2026, okay? We'll see how long the joy lasts.
You're happy. You're a happy warrior. You're always happy.
I try. What is there to complain about besides my teeth? Okay.
True.
So, Dad, before we close things out, do you want to leave everyone with a tip of the week, of the year? Maybe start the year off with a strong tip besides stick with your teams?
Yeah. Before you move to a new location or before you visit a location, check out the eating establishment. By the way, Swebb, they have a lot of eating establishments down here. Your mother told me about a year ago, there's only 2 things to do down here: shop and eat.
3, go to the beach.
I'm not a beach person.
Go to the pool.
It's only 60 degrees out, Swebb.
In a month's time, you'll be down there all the time.
Well, I don't know about that. But we'll see. We'll see. You just got to check out the eating establishments before you go anywhere and make sure the chow is good and plentiful.
And my tip is stay joyful, folks. Stay joyful. All right. That concludes this week's episode, our first episode of 2025. Be sure to follow us at Dad and Swebb on Instagram and X. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Rumble, and share this episode with a friend. We will see you next week.
So long.
Thank you for tuning in to Dad and Swebb Talk Sports, the show where we cover all of our favorite sports moments from the past week. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and Rumble, and follow us at Dad and Swebb on Instagram and X. See you next week.